Hey guys, how you guys doing today? We're back today with another video. This is going to be a long video, and it's a couple replays. I believe there's going to be 3 or 4 replays in this video. I think this first one is obviously in the AMX30B, which I've actually come to like a lot recently. I believe the second one is going to be in an IS4. I believe the third and fourth are going to be in the M48 Patton, and the last one is going to be in the IS7. Now this first one, and I believe one of the M48 Patton videos, have already been put up on my YouTube channel, but I was lacking content. Today the servers are down on World of Tanks PS4, so I can't get too many replays today, or I'm probably not going to be able to get any replays today. But that's besides the point. So I'm using a couple replays, and I believe there's going to be 4 or 5 replays in this video, and this first one is already up on my channel. I think it was my most recent AMX30B video. It was called, I think if I remember correctly, it was called I Tried My Best But Didn't Succeed, or Tried My Best and It Wasn't Enough, something like that. But this is actually a really good 30B game, and it shows the actual strengths of the vehicle, being the speed and the accuracy. Because as everybody knows, this tank was nerfed into oblivion, I think 2 years ago. I think towards the end of 2016 or toward the beginning of 2017. Or maybe even the mid to end of 2017. But that's besides the point. As you can tell by the video title already, today is going to be my thoughts on Russian bias on console. Now everybody knows, or at least everybody who plays PC knows, that PC is very heavily influenced by Russian bias. YouTubers like, for example, just to name off a few, Lemming Rush, I think the Fosh U, Quickie Baby, Des Games, and I believe what's his name that plays with Quickie Baby. He's an older guy. I forget what his name is, but they have all stated that World of Tanks console has Russian bias, or at least believe it. Not so much Quickie Baby, because he actually made a video against it, saying that he doesn't necessarily think Russian bias is on PC, but Russian tanks are very strong on PC. Now, it's a sour subject to talk about for console players, because a lot of console players do believe that there is very strong Russian bias on PC, or on a console. The subject is whether or not there is Russian bias today. That's what we're going to be talking about on console World of Tanks. Now obviously by the title of the video, like I said before, you could tell what my opinion is, but please hear me out. I've got information to back it up. Now, to start out with, I think I'll just commentate on the rest of this game, because there is a lot to talk about, but I don't think I'll have enough time because this video is 30 minutes long. So, to start out with, I'll just commentate on this video. So far we've done 2,500 damage. We've taken roughly 1,300 damage in return, and our fuel tanks are damaged. Now, in the beginning of the game, you saw me trying to snipe it out in the middle. That wasn't working too much for me, since that's where I was getting most of the damage done, and this shot right here made no sense to me. It's .32 accuracy, and the shot goes as far right as possible into the front armor of the T-54's turret and ricochets off. But I do end up getting to put another round into him, and that's up to just under 3,000 damage. And there's the Sheridan. Now I think, yeah, I led that a little too much. I was thinking the shell velocity was a lot worse than it actually is, because this thing's shell velocity was nerfed. And if I'm to talk about this tank real quick right now, it used to be a direct counter to the Leopard 1. It used to be a phenomenal sniping medium tank. It used to be amazing at that role. In fact, it probably did that role better than the Leopard, because this tank actually had a turret that could bounce some things, and I believe it had better rate of fire, it had better DPM, it had better gun handling, all that kind of stuff, and I think it had better view range as well. But I think, don't quote me on that. Now when this thing was nerfed, it used to have, I believe, 260 pen on its APCR, and it was either 320 or 330 heat pen on its premium rounds. Now, this tank was nerfed for reasons that it had too high of a win rate and it had too high of a survival rate. Now, what kind of gameplay do you use in a sniping medium tank? Well, you stay at long range. And what that means is that chances are you're going to be alive for a long time. I know that the Leopard 1 has a very high survival rate because it stays at long range. And the E50M has its survival rate because it has its armor to back it up. But this thing was nerfed because it had a high win rate and a high survival rate. Now, I disagree with nerfing tanks for that reason, because if you nerf the tank for that reason, then you're only punishing the people who are playing the tank the way it's supposed to be played. Now, myself, the style has had to change playing this tank. I believe I got it... excuse me, that's quite the yawn. I believe I got this tank when it was... just after it was nerfed. I believe I got it at mid-2017 to, I think, early 2018. But this tank was heavily nerfed. Its standard pen was nerfed from 260 down to 248. Its heat pen was nerfed from 320 or 330 down to 300. And its shell velocity was butchered from, I think, 1525 to 1100. And its heat rounds from, I think, 1125 down to, I think, 940. But the tank overall got hit by the Wargaming Nerf Hammer. Now, this game is going to be in the IS4. And this game, you guys, I do not believe you guys have seen. And this is actually a game that's going to show exactly what the IS4 is good at. And while we do that, I'll actually talk about a little bit of Russian bias. Or apparent Russian bias on console. And it kind of tags along with a little bit to PC as well with this tank. I apologize again. I'm yawning again. I'm quite the tired one today. But anyways, on PC, this tank used to be the Tier 9 heavy tank. The STI used to not be there, and I don't think the KV4 was there either. I think the line went KV1, KV1S, IS, IS3, IS4, IS7. I believe that's how the line went when World of Tanks first came out on PC. Now, when they decided to split the branch and add in, I think, the KV3, KV4, and the STI, they moved this thing up to Tier 10 because at the time it was arguably the greatest Tier 9 heavy tank, and nobody really knew how to pen it, and nobody really still does know how to pen it reliably. And the trick is to not shoot its lower plate or side armor when it's angling towards you. You shoot kind of like the shoulder plates when it's angling at you. And if it's facing directly at you, do not shoot it in its lower plate because it has roughly 260 to 280 millimeters of effective armor because it has track links on the lower plate. What you want to do is you want to shoot it in the upper plate, kind of where like the driver's hatch is. There's a little bit more, it's not really a driver's hatch, it's more of a driver's weak point. And you kind of want to shoot it there. Now, on console and on PC both, this thing has kind of fallen out of favor. In my opinion, it's fallen out of favor. I believe I take the top spot on the team, but this game is going to show you exactly what the strengths are to the IS4 and how to play it the right way. And that is to angle, angle, angle. And that's all you want to do, is just try and angle your armor the best you can. Now, these first couple shots are kind of poo-poo. I took 2 damaging shots. I think one was like a high explosive round from the E100, if I remember correctly. And the other, I think, was from the Centurion Action X or the Centurion 7-1 there. Or maybe it was the 215B. I don't know, but I took 2 at least 400 damage shots. Now, I've instantly switched to my heat rounds because with this tank, it doesn't have the DPM, and you want to make sure that you're hitting your rounds. But, as you can see now, angle, angle, angle. I'm not angling too much, but you can afford to angle a lot in this tank. Now, when it comes to like the bias nature, there are threads all over the place saying or asking Wargaming console and Wargaming PC as well to bring this tank back to life, because this tank needs some love. It has the same amount of rounds as the IS-7, but it has 40, or hold on, 90, 80, 70, 60, 50. It has 50 less alpha than the IS-7. It has the same amount of rounds. It has 5 rounds a minute DPM, which gives it 2,200 DPM, which is on the not too bad, but not the greatest side of DPM. Its gun handling is the worst out of the Russian heavies. Although its pen, I believe, is the best, second best, second to the Object 277, which the 277, I believe, has 265 on its standard round, whereas this thing has 258. And yeah, this tank needs a little bit of love, and Wargaming refuse to buff it. They refuse to buff it. They've said it before that the IS-4 does not need to be buffed, or I believe they've said it before that it doesn't need to be buffed, which this gameplay shows maybe it doesn't actually need to be buffed. But that's because the tank was in a very, very favorable position. But in my opinion, this tank needs to be buffed, and Wargaming just refused to buff it. They refuse. It's like a moth on the wall. They just keep smacking it away. They just keep killing it. It's annoying, and they just don't want you to be talking about it anymore. Yeah, they just refuse to buff. They refuse to buff it, and I know that's a broken record right now, but it's a fact. It used to be the better Tier 10 heavy tank until people learnt how to play the IS-7, because the IS-7 takes a little bit of skill to play. You have to know what you can bounce, what you can't bounce. You have to know that. You have to know how your pike nose works. Whereas this thing is it's box armor, but it's extraordinarily. It has the second best side armor in the game at 160, second only to the mouse. Even the E100 has, I think, 120 or 140 millimeters of side armor, and the Type 5 Heavy has, I think, 140. This thing is smaller than those tanks, weighs less than those tanks, and it has the second best side armor in the game, which means you are able to angle exceptionally well in this tank. You could afford to over-angle. That's what made this tank such a great heavy tank when it first got put to Tier 10. That's what made it the better heavy tank compared to the IS-7. But then people learned how to play the IS-7, and this thing kind of fell out of favor, and I don't see that many of them on the battlefield anymore. I see them maybe once every 20 games, whereas I see almost 2 IS-7s every 3 games. But that's besides the point. The point is, this tank fell out of favor, and because of that, Wargaming don't believe that this tank needs a nerf, or needs a buff. I apologize. They don't believe, and look at it, right there to the left on the screen. That's an AMX-30B. Either an AMX-30 or an AMX-30B. It looks like the 30B because the AMX-30, I believe, doesn't have the netting, or like the basket around the turret. But this tank fell out of favor, and it needs a buff really fast. And Wargaming, or if any of you guys want to send this to Wargaming, or let them know, I'd really appreciate it, because I love this tank, but I feel like it just needs better offensive powers, because it's a very strong tank for holding the line. It has the health for it, 2,500, and it has the armor for it, and it has the punchy, gun, and the gun's able to penetrate what it needs, but it just doesn't have the offensive powers to do that. It doesn't have the capability to go offense as strong as the IS-7 does. Now, we're coming towards the end of this video, and I've dealt 5,279 damage, and I've assisted with nearly 3,000. I'm at about, if I'm to calculate it real quick, about 7.5, maybe even 8,000 damage combined right now. And that is, I believe that's a mastery in this tank. And that would have easily been a mastery in the STI, which a lot of people say arguably the STI is better tier for tier, and the STI is at tier 9. It has worse mobility, worse armor, It has obviously the godlike turret. It has worse DPM. It has all sorts of things that are worse than the IS-4, but it's still considered the better tank tier for tier. Why is that? Because the IS-4 has fallen out of favor. The IS-7 is the better tier 10 heavy. Now, that's 5,452 damage, and that's a win for us. We blocked 3,780, and that game was probably the greatest game that I had in the IS-4. Now, since that video is done, I've got roughly 10-15 minutes left to actually talk about my opinion on Russian bias. Now, I do have some notes here. You can hear the paper. You can hear the papers. There's a lot to say. There's a lot to say because there's a lot of tanks that I need to talk about. So, hear me out. I have the information to back it up. This game's in the M48 patent. I believe this game was called Teamwork. But this game's a good game. I think I do over 6,000 damage in the patent. And I think I do over 6,000 damage, and it's a win. It's a victory for us. But now, just to point out real quick that I'm comparing these tanks to their Russian selves, or their Russian counterparts, and their Russian counterparts on PC. Not comparing it to other medium tanks in the game, because Russian tanks aren't really that comparable to other medium tanks in the game. Russia is kind of its standalone nation. You know, like America and British, they kind of go hand in hand together. The Super Conqueror and the Chieftain play similar to the E5. Germany and Poland kind of go together. Germany, Poland, and France go together. The AMX M454 is very heavily armored, just like the E100 and the Mouse, and you can play it like those tanks. And I just got a message on my phone. You can play those tanks very similarly, and you can play those a lot like each other. As well as, like I said before in my 30B video, the MX-30B and the Leopard 1 used to be the two best sniping medium tanks, but the Leopard 1 is now the best after the 30B's nerf. And they have the lightly armored, they have the light armor, those two tanks, but nothing really is comparable to Russia. I mean, arguably you can compare like DPM, and you can compare pen and mobility, but if you're to compare tanks by pure overall playstyle, Russia has its own specialities, and it's kind of a standalone nation, kind of like this 140 that we just myself and the team and myself absolutely annihilated. And then we're about to do the same thing to this Batchat, and this is what teamwork is. But Russia is its standalone nation, so I'm only comparing the Russian tanks in this video that I'm going to be talking about to its Russian counterparts. So, to start off with, we'll start off with arguably the worst tank in the game, and that is the Object 268 version 4. Now, just to point out real quick, this tank, the Object 268 version 4, is still, to this day, considered OP on console. Because it does not, still has phenomenal mobility, it has amazing frontal and side armor. Tier 8 and Tier 9 heavy tanks have almost no shot of going through it, unless it's a Tier 9 TD with premium rounds, or a Tier 10 tank destroyer with premium rounds, or any Tier 10 heavy and medium tank with premium rounds. That's really the only counter to the 268 version 4, but mind you, medium tanks have already amazing pen, so you don't really need to load premium rounds all that often in the medium tank. So all of the time the 268 version 4 does get, and even on this game, when I see it in the game, the only thing, when I do see it in game, it has a bunch of block damage. Almost every time I've seen it in the game, it has at least 3,000 to 4,000 damage blocked alone, because it has very, very strong defensive capabilities. And that's going to be a trend in this video that you're going to see. As a lot of the tanks have strong defensive capabilities, but when it comes to the offense nature of the tank, that PC has, console just seemed to completely and totally remove that ability from the tank. So to the 268 version 4, This tank does have phenomenal armor. It has the best, or it has the most hit points of the other Russian tank destroyers. It has 2,000, whereas I believe the 268 has 1,950, and the 263 has 1,900. It does have that. It has the punchy gun with 293 pen, and it has 650 alpha. Yet it's considered the worst tier 10 tank destroyer, even worse than the WZ-113 GFT, which that tank I'm not going to get into at all about. I don't even know what that tank was, what was done to that tank to make it so bad. All I know is that people on console seem to absolutely despise the 113 GFT, the tier 10 Chinese tank destroyer, that is. Why is it considered the worst tier 10 TD compared to that thing? Well, let's see. It has the worst DPM by a long shot to the 268 and the 263. The 263 has, I believe, base... sorry about that voice crack there. The 263 I believe has base 3,000 DPM. And the 268 I believe has like 2,600 or 2,700. Whereas the 268 version 4 has sub 2,300 DPM. I think it's like 2,150 something, I believe. That means it has a worse rate of fire than the higher alpha gun on the 268. And it has worse rate of fire, it has worse accuracy, it has, I believe, tied for aim time with the 263. But, well, there's that game in the M48 patent. I'll quickly say something about that. That's 7,000 combined damage. That's 7,300 combined damage. Now it's going to be a replay in the IS7, and this replay is going to show you that sometimes Russian tanks really do work. But there's the 268 version 4. It has worse DPM, it has the worst accuracy. I don't think it has the worst aim time. It has the worst DPM by a long shot compared to the 268 and the 263. It's the second slowest tier 10 TD in the game, only second to the E3. It has terrible gun handling compared to the 268, 263. Worst accuracy. Give me a second, I'm getting a call. I'll be right back. Alright guys, I'm back. Sorry, that was a call from my girlfriend. So I'm gonna quickly let her know what's happening. Anyways, like I was saying, the 268 version 4 has arguably the worst stats compared to the other two tier 10 tank destroyers. What is the reason that somebody would own the 268 version 4? I don't know any other reason other than if they already own the standard 268 and the 263 and they just want all three tier 10 Russian tank destroyers. Now, the Object 907. This tank has overall worse DPM than the other Soviet medium tanks, other than the 430U, that has 30 less DPM with a higher alpha gun. I don't think the mobility was nerfed. I don't think the gun handling was nerfed. I don't think most of its stats were nerfed. All I know is that coming from PC over to console, it had its DPM nerfed to hell. The K91. This tank, a lot of people can agree with me on. It's arguably the most forgettable tier 10 medium tank in the game, in the entire game. This tank was supposed to have multiple things it could do better than the other Russian mediums. Let's name off those things. It was supposed to have better mobility, it was supposed to have better DPM, it was supposed to have better shell velocity, it was supposed to have almost better everything except for defensive capabilities. It was supposed to have a very, very high offensive capability. But it does have, however, accuracy, shell velocity, aim time, and view range. All those things it has better than all the other Russian tanks. But That's all it has going for it. It's the best sniping. It's arguably the best sniping tank in the game because it has such a high shell velocity. Even though tanks like the STRV 103B and the Grill 15 have amazing accuracy, the K91 isn't lacking in the accuracy department, but it has significantly better shell velocity than every other tank in the game. I think it has 1,700, and I think the second best is like what the old AMX-30B was with the 1525. Everything else that the tank has is pretty much worse than the Soviet medium. The only reason anybody would get this tank is if they want, once again, all the Soviet medium tanks. It has worse mobility, has worse maneuverability. In fact, it has worse camo rating than the bigger, heavier hitting Object 430U. The 430U is going to get away without getting spotted in more situations than the K91 is. And the K91 is supposed to be the long-range, high-camo sniping tank. It's supposed to. But for some odd reason, it has worse camo rating than the 430U. And to get into the last tank on this list is the Object 277. This tank is actually quite good on console, and I personally enjoy it. I sold it because I think at the time it had very, very crap credit factor. It didn't make a lot of credits, and I was losing a significant amount more. My grammar is off today. I was losing a lot more credits than I was making credits in that tank. It has second worst hit points after the 260. It only has 2,200, where the IS-7, as you see right now, has 2,400. The Object 705A has 2,450. The IS-4 has 2,500. Then there's the 277 with 2,200, and the 260, the Object 260, the Tier 10 premium Russian tank, has 2,100. Overall, this tank wasn't hit too hard when being moved from PC to console, but still hit hard enough to its DPM when moved from PC that almost all other Tier 10 heavies, other than the high alpha ones such as the E100 and the 60 TP, can outplay it. The 60 TP and the E100 are the only two tanks that can't really outplay it because they have the high alpha and they don't have the greatest DPM. But almost all other Tier 10 heavies, especially Russian heavies, can outplay the 277 in most situations. My point is about this, console doesn't seem to want to have a Russian bias in the game. Every tank that's been added in 2019, like another YouTuber who goes by the name Clone Guy, had said in fact, all other Russian tanks that were added into the game in 2019 have been nerfed significantly, if not nerfed very, very heavy to one aspect of the tank. If you want to sit there and you want to argue that there's Russian bias in the game because there's still the Object 140, the Object 430, the T62A, the IS-7, the 263, there's still the Object 261. If you want to sit there and argue that there's Russian bias because of those tanks, then go right ahead. I agree with that. But if you're going to sit there, but you can't possibly sit there and say that there's Russian bias in the game when Wargaming console are very clearly trying their hardest to prevent that and have succeeded with the new Russian tanks that have been added into the game. It's you can't sit there and say it. Yeah, it's not possible to sit there and say that there's Russian bias in the game. The T100 LT, in fact, I can't say that much about the T100 LT because almost all all camo ratings and World of Tanks console, the camo works significantly different, a lot differently than PC. But you can't sit there and tell people that World of Tanks console has Russian bias. I've heard the argument that it has the most Tier 10 heavy tank, or it has the most Tier 10 tanks. Fine, say that it's biased against that. But that does not mean that Russia is overpowered. That just means that there's a lot of tanks that Russia has. But that's the end of the video there. There's this replay, which I'm going to commentate on right now, I've done about 9,000 or about 10,000 damage combined in this replay. That game was a great game. This game shows that sometimes Russian tanks do work out. But in my overall opinion, I still stand by the fact that there is no Russian bias on console. I don't believe so. They nerfed almost all other nations, but that's besides the point. This video is coming to an end now. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.